Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, an Introduction to Spring Application Advisor. Before we bring in our amazing speaker and crew, I do want to just go over some housekeeping items. We'd love to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for us, please submit them below using the Ask a Question tab, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions live. In addition, we know that you guys are here to hear from us, but we'd love to hear from you. So leave us feedback using the Rate This tab also below the presentation screen. I'd like to bring in our amazing speaker, Raquel, as well as a group of folks that will be helping out in the background, answering any questions during the presentation and through the chat. That's Chris and Michelle. Hey, all. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Hey.
All right. Off to you, Raquel.
Okay, thanks. Well, hi, I'm Raquel. I'm the product manager of Spring Application Advisor. And first of all, thank you for joining me in this webinar. And indeed, I'm here mainly to explain you why having a continuous upgrade culture matters and how integrating a Spring Application Advisor helps you to implement that culture change. Well, let's start from the very beginning. Something that we have learned during our product research is that organizations are struggling to keep their Spring applications without vulnerabilities. And just shifting security left is not enough. From one side, we have the security teams that are integrating vulnerability scanners in their CI/CD pipelines to let developers identify by themselves the new CVEs. However, that impacts developers because remediations are not always easy to apply, right? And it might take weeks of work. And guess what? That removes predictability in the business features that they were planning to build, which at the end creates a lot of uncertainty for leadership. So at the end, what we learned is that the main bottleneck of the shifting left approach is the lack of automatic remediations. When organizations introduce tooling to remediate new CVEs in their software delivery lifecycle is when we talk about implementing a continuous upgrade culture. Spring Application Advisor is a solution that enables you to implement that culture change by not only upgrading your Spring dependencies, but also addressing any potential breaking change in the APIs. As you can think, that is going to impact as well your DORA metrics, right? The modernization space is quite new, and there are very few players. However, you probably have heard about Dependabot, Snyk, OpenRewrite, and others. So why is Spring Application Advisor different? Let's start with Dependabot and Snyk. They create incremental automatic pull requests across multiple Git repositories, right? And they are designed to upgrade your dependencies. And this is great because developers don't need to manually upgrade their dependencies in order to remediate new CVEs. However, if the new dependency version that is actually fixing a CVE introduces an API breaking change, what is going to happen is that these automatic pull requests are going to fail in the CI build, and developers need to spend time to manually fix it. On the other hand, we have all these different OpenRewrite-based solutions, and OpenRewrite is an excellent tool to design and apply automatic code changes. However, only 19% of the Spring project versions are now covered by open source recipes. Spring Application Advisor wants to give the Dependabot or Snyk experience by generating those automatic pull requests and upgrade your Spring dependencies, but as well remediating the Java API breaking changes that are not yet covered by the open source recipes. This means that Open Rewrite is an invisible technical detail of a Spring Application Advisor. A Spring Application Advisor is a solution designed to continuously and incrementally upgrade your Spring applications at scale. However, I would like to highlight the incremental part, because that means that Application Advisor creates short-lived branches, because the introduced changes now could be easy to review, test, and therefore faster to integrate. Now, let me show you how it works with a real application.
It doesn't look like we have any questions yet. So, folks, if you guys have any questions, submit them below using the Ask a Questions tab, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions live today. All right, back to you, Raquel.
Okay, thanks. Well, a Spring Application Advisor primarily have two main components. One is a server component, which is a boot application, which is what we are running here. And then we have a native CLI. Right? This native CLI, therefore, doesn't require any particular Java version in your applications to start upgrading them. And there are two main commands, the build config and the upgrade plan. For this demo, we are going to show the classic Spring Pet Clinic repository. It's open source, so you can play with it. It's a classic CRUD application using a Spring Boot. And at the end, if we show the POM.xml file, one second, yeah, we can see that it's using boot 2.7, right? And it's using Java 8, right? So the first step using a Spring Application Advisor is to produce a build configuration. The build configuration is primarily contain the dependency tree or SBOM of this application, and as well other details about the version of the Maven or Gradle or Java tools to properly select what are the open rewrite recipes that needs to be executed based on the current status. Let me show you. So first is resolving all the dependencies. Then the JDK version, which is the target version that we are compiling the project, and the build tool, which could be Maven, Maven Wrapper, Gradle, or Gradle Wrapper. The build configuration is stored in a local file, right? And indeed, if we look at it, what we are going to see is a CycloneDX SBOM with all the dependencies, right? This means that it's in a standard format across Maven and Gradle, are potential any future build systems. Now that we have our build configuration, this is the input that we are going to provide to the App Advisor server to know what is going to be the upgrade plan. To know what is that upgrade plan, we are going to do this. And because this is a standalone application that doesn't require any internet connection, by doing this, I'm going to see that the upgrade plan is a sequence of steps. And every step could be an independent pull request, right? The first step is about upgrading boot 2.7 to 3, but this also means, according my dependencies, that I need as well to create a Spring Framework and Micrometer, right? Then the second step is to upgrade from 3.0 to 3.1, and then the latest step is to 3.3. But let's see what is the benefit of upgrading. To do so, we are gonna do advisor build config publish and the same server. And the build configuration has been published. This means that the server knows everything about our repository, and therefore we could provide for leadership a UI where we can see what are the different Spring dependencies and their vulnerabilities. Let me show you that. This one. Okay. Well, this is a temporal UI that we are using to show you, to illustrate how this information could be useful. But at the end, we want that this same experience is exported into the Tanzu platform, right? Well, I have this repository, which is what I have been playing about, the Spring Pet Clinic, and there are 7 critical vulnerabilities if I'm using this particular version of boot 2.7, right? And means that it's gonna require a high effort to upgrade, and there are dependencies that are no longer supported even in commercial, right? When we click into the details, we can see all the different vulnerabilities, all the different dependencies, and for each one, what are all the direct or transitive vulnerabilities. So this is giving us information about why this repository should be upgraded in order to have a secure application. Now let's come back to the CLI again. Now that I know my upgrade plan is when I want to start applying the upgrade plan, which means that the first step is going to be executed. So the only thing that I need to do is to replace this get subcommand by apply. And then is when App Advisor is going to select the valid open rewrite recipes and execute them in my local machine, right? The important aspect about this that you should be aware of is that the developer or whoever is the process that is going to execute the advisor CLI doesn't require any information or reference to open rewrite. Now, the upgrade has happened.
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yes.
One of the things is, are all of these open source, open rewrite scripts, or are they recipes, or are some of them commercial as well?
So there are going to be commercial and open source recipes because, as I have said, there is a gap in the open source recipes ecosystem, and there is only 19% of the Spring project versions that are covered by this open source ecosystem. So by having Tanzu Spring Essentials, you are not only going to have a Spring Application Advisor access, but as well to the commercial recipes, which could be executed through Advisor or whatever system you want to. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So let's see what are the changes that have been introduced. Now, the App Advisor have upgraded me as it was promised in the upgrade plan to 2.7 to 3.0, and as well the Java version, because this is a requirement. Jacoco as well, so some of the dependencies are as well updated to start using Jakarta, because that was the main requirement of both 3.0. And look what, there are not only the dependencies upgraded, but as well there are Java API changes. Therefore, all the imports have moved from Javax to Jakarta. And we are gonna see as well that we are taking advantage of some nice features of Spring Boot, such as reusing the parameter name as a path variable name. That is something that we can reduce to get much better code readability. The auto white annotation has been removed because it's no longer needed. Right? And here we are taking advantage of Java 17 because this concatenated string can now be shown as a text block, which is easier to understand. Well, these are pretty much all the changes that you are going to expect to see. This is the final. And then, indeed, if we do, in this case, Maven package to see if the application is actually working, then we are going to proceed with the compilation and as well the test, right? So it's a matter of validating if all these changes have worked, which is at the end, right, what the CI system is checking. Here we are, right? Now, coming back to the presentation. Now I have shown to you what is the local experience of a Spring Application Advisor, but how can be executed in a continuous manner, right? That is the next step. Our recommendation is that the Spring Application Advisor, with the commands that we have provided to you, is integrated in your CI/CD pipeline as follows. The idea is that App Advisor is executed after a commit is integrated in the main branch. Therefore, guess what? If a new pull request from Application Advisor is merged, the SBOM will be updated, and the next step of the upgrade plan will be the next one. Let's now see how it works using GitHub Actions. With GitHub Actions, it's just a matter of checking out having a workflow that actually checks out your source code and integrates one single action that is primarily downloading App Advisor from your internal repository, which should be synced with the Spring Enterprise Maven repository. We are going to see the details later on. Unpacks the file and applies the same commands, right? Then you can think or consider that this means that all the applications need to change their CI/CD pipeline. But there are good news to you, because if you're using a CI enterprise solution, there is always a means to integrate steps at the end of your builds, so that the existing CI/CD pipelines don't need to be changed, but you can execute some logic at the end of the builds. For instance, in GitHub Enterprise, you can do that by overriding the actions runner hook job completed with a script that is actually running a Spring Application Advisor. There is an equivalent solution with GitHub Enterprise, right? And as well for Jenkins. So it's not something exclusively from one CI/CD system. Indeed, let me show you one action. This is in a Spring Pet Clinic repo as well, and I have created this workflow, which is actually only checking out the source code, setting up the Java version to actually build the code, and running a Spring Application Advisor, right? These are the same commands that we have seen in the previous demo. And then what you are gonna see after running it is a pull request like this one, which is informing you about the upgrade step, and for sure, the same code changes that we have reviewed are applied here. Okay. In the demo, we have seen as well a temporal solution to illustrate how leadership can understand the status of all their applications, which is what we refer as portfolio analysis. But this is something that will be properly integrated into the Tanzu platform in the next month, like I'm showing in these screens, right? So you can see the list of your applications, and as well for each of them, what is the latest upgrade plan and the vulnerabilities that are going to be addressed. As a summary, Spring Application Advisor is an ideal solution for engineering leadership in order to strategically manage the development resources and security risks, and developers to streamline their workflow and focus on building great applications. Finally, let me introduce some details for those that are interested in the recipes that the Spring Application Advisor provides. As I have said, first of all, they are commercial, and they are going to be only available for the Tanzu Spring Essential customers. You can run the commercial recipes without a Spring Application Advisor, and the same in the other way around. It is going to be possible to integrate third-party recipes that you have built by yourself in a Spring Application Advisor in order to downstream the best practices that you would like to apply across all your repositories. However, Spring Application Advisor recipes have some important design principles that you should be aware of. First of all, we take advantage of the release train of Spring Boot, and we generate the recipes to update those dependencies that have been temporarily overwritten or are not managed anymore by the boot parent. But a Spring Application Advisor orchestrates the recipes that needs to be executed at runtime to upgrade a Spring-based application based on the current version of your dependencies. That means that a Spring Advisor only executes what is required depending on your dependencies, and can also upgrade Spring Framework projects that might consume, for instance, why not Spring Security, right? And other Spring components. Another important design principle is that is different from the open source recipes is that no previous upgrades are executed, and also refers to the part that we are only executing what is required. For instance, to upgrade to Boot 3.1 is not going to apply the upgrade for Boot 3.0. That could be something obvious, but the current design of the open source rewrite recipes are in the opposite way around. And finally, the upgrade process does not continue if there are dependency conflicts. For instance, if you have internal dependencies or custom starters that are using Spring dependencies, Spring Application Advisor is not gonna upgrade those applications that rely on your internal dependency if there is no recipe associated to your custom or internal library. Okay. That part is a little bit tricky, so feel free to ask any questions here.
Okay. And as far as that goes, Raquel, if I have an internal library that may be handling, internal governance guidelines and such for my applications, what is the best way to get that upgraded and then have all of my applications take advantage of it?
So Spring Application Advisor is going to provide a configuration file for the Spring updates, and you can have your own best practices or your own configuration file. So you need to create the recipe that is going to add that governance library, and therefore App Advisor, if the conditions to add that library are met, is going to create that pull request across all those repositories that should start using that library, right? For instance, if for your governance library you need to use Spring Boot 2.7 and beyond, then this is a condition that you can set, and then those pull requests to add your governance library are going to be created in only those repositories. But this is something that is not yet available, is part of our roadmap, and is going to be in the next months. So, like I was pointing out, Spring Application Advisor is using Open Rewrite as an implementation detail, and all our commercial recipes are for sure based on the latest version of Open Rewrite. Therefore, it means that if you have access to the Spring Enterprise Maven repository, or you have your own internal Maven repository that is actually syncing the content with the Spring Enterprise Maven repo, then you can run those commercial recipes in isolation if you want to, using Maven, for instance, right? Because it's a matter of having your Maven repository settings right, having that repository defined in the plugin repository section, in the case of Maven repos, or Gradle there is an equivalent term, and then run the existing and documented open source command to write the recipes in Open Rewrite. The same applies for the modern platform, for instance. So Spring Application Advisor is part of Tanzu Spring Essentials, which means that you need an Spring Enterprise subscription. The recommended approach that we give to customers is that you internally sync your internal Artifactory or Nexus to the Maven Central in order to get the Spring Boot open source releases, and as well to the Spring Enterprise subscription, internal artifact repository, right? Therefore, all your repositories are gonna use the same connection no matter where the artifacts are stored, right? And finally, as a summary, the current status of Spring Application Advisor is that it's in beta, and we have an initial functionality to provide these automatic upgrades, and the current versions are using only the open source recipes. And the next step is gonna provide or integrate those commercial Spring recipes in a Spring Application Advisor. If you want to see them in action and know more about it, consider to join us in Spring 1. And finally, the future of a Spring Application Advisor goes beyond the upgrade plan, because we want to offer a means to have opinionated recommendations, like you were mentioning about adding a governance library, for instance, right? Those recommendations can be from us because ourselves as the Spring commercial teams can give you opinionated ways to build and maintain your Spring applications at scale, but you can as well integrate your own best practices. So developers don't need to modify anything in their CI/CD pipelines, but they can receive those pull requests with recommendations or even some highlights in their IDE.
And Raquel, we got a question here.
Sure.
Thanks, Nevin. My application depends on an internal framework that extends Spring Boot. Can I add my own recipes to execute at the same time as Spring recipes?
Correct. Yes, the answer is yes. Indeed, I can share you how. One second. Let me show you how.
And please, anyone who has a question, feel free to send it in the Ask a Question link on BrightTalk.
So this is the current mapping that we have between the different Spring projects. In this case, is Spring Boot, for instance, right? The different versions, right, or generations that we formally use as a name. And I want to show you particularly this one, exactly. And this one was the recipe that I was using. The idea is that your organization can build equivalent JSON files with that mapping, and therefore, by defining this requirement section, you can say, well, my library requires, in your case, Spring Boot 2.7 or 3.0 or whatever version. Therefore, Advisor is going to pick the recipes associated to these versions and is going to provide the CLI all this list of recipes to execute in an atomic way. So you can create your own recipes for your own starters or internal dependencies, and let App Advisor figure out what are the recipes that needs to be executed together. You only need to know what are the Spring projects that are required and the corresponding version.
And then also in Spring Enterprise, or how do you download Application Advisor and get access to it?
That's a good question. So in the Broadcom support platform, if you have a user, you can have, let me share my screen again. So we have a commercial Maven Enterprise repository, and Spring Application Advisor is under this path. And as you can see, at this moment, there are two versions, right? In each of the versions, you can see the server jar, which is the boot application, but sorry, let me go back. You can see as well the CLI. So it's the server and the CLI, right? The way to access here is simply by going to Broadcom support portal. And then you need to log in that might take a while for me. But in any case, I think that it's going to be easy to give you a different approach. Forget about this.
Yeah, we can share a link to our docs as well.
Yes, that is the plan. So these are the docs. I can provide the link here.
We can also include we'll also include the link in the post-event email, in addition to the link to the Spring One event as well, Raquel.
Perfect. That would be awesome. And then here in the Spring Enterprise subscription is where you get the steps to configure your Maven and access to that repository with the right URLs. And here you can see the steps using the Broadcom customer support portal to go to Tanzu. Then you need to go to My Downloads and look for the Spring Enterprise subscription. This is gonna give you this option. Click Green Token for the repository access. Click here, and then you are gonna have the access token that you can use to connect to these repositories.
Thanks, Raquel. And if there aren't any other questions, AJ, you want to close us out?
Yeah, close us out here. I do want to just say first, thank you, Raquel, for the amazing presentation, for Michelle, Chris, for helping set this up, for everyone here who's joined us live. I did see a fellow VMware Tanzu Broadcom person here online, Nevin. I think he also asked a question, so Nevin, thanks for joining us. I think Raquel did mention Spring One, so we just want to let you guys know there's 2 different ways to experience all the great things that VMware Tanzu, VMware Broadcom are presenting. That is in person at VMware Explore in Las Vegas, taking place in August. There's also a all virtual, all free version of Spring One coming to you live, and that is free to join. I think we did include a link here in the announcements tab. We'll also include the link to register and find out more about the virtual event and the in-person event at the in the post-event email as well. So again, just a special thank you again to Michelle, to Chris, and to Raquel for the amazing presentation. We hope to see you guys at our next event. This has been recorded and will be available on demand shortly after the end of this presentation. We hope to see you guys at our next event. Thanks all.
Thanks.